again, I feel like I'm like right here with you on your journey. And it seems like every point of where you had an opportunity presented, or even when struggle presented, or being unsure, you had this like, let's try this. And even with that, there was some sort of plan in place. There was like a vision, and here's kind of how we're going to do it. There was always like a
Mhm.
solution added to that. And I think that as much as the Tops thing presented an opportunity, I think it was more of a runway for you to really put to work what you had been doing this whole time in your career, which is here's something I can do, here's kind of a plan, and then here's the sweat equity to bring it to life, and just nonstop on that end. And then Tops is like, here's your runway, ready for takeoff.
Yeah, and it was crazy too because this was all 2020 is like when COVID hit, and like
Yeah.
the project 2020 even they delayed the launch a month because of like we all at least I thought COVID was going to last 2 weeks. Everyone locked down. The virus will die out. We'll move back. We'll get back to life.
Yeah.
So they postponed it a month out of like precaution, and then like COVID just kept getting worse and worse. And I was like, I remember thinking like, oh my god, if they shelf this project, like I don't know what I'm going to do. But they didn't, and like because COVID shut down all the sports, where like nobody like baseball, for example, wasn't happening. They stopped playing, and so everybody that wanted baseball like their fix, like turned to these sports cards because there also wasn't there was no other cards coming out at that time because there wasn't anything happening, right? It was
Yeah.
just these like recreations. And so like I ended up really lucking out, and I really like leaned into like I actually really enjoy like working in isolation. It's funny when like everything happened and it's like quarantine. I was like, quarantine. That's what I like. That's what it's called. I want to quarantine because I like love just being in my studio and like doing my thing. And so I really like deep dove into this baseball card community, and I started live streaming uh, every single day, 10:23 p.m. Eastern. I would live stream, and like on average, the streams were like 3 hours each, and it was different every day. Like the first time I did it, I was painting one of my cards, and it was a test. I was like, hey, you guys want to watch me paint? I'm not even going to talk to you guys. I'm just going to put the computer on screen. I am doing my thing, and people just loved it. Like they watched the whole time and watch me paint this Ricky Henderson card, and then they were like, we need more of this. We need more of this.
Welcome to the Paint Method podcast. Thanks for joining us. If you're coming back, if you've heard some other episodes, we're just getting into this really fun new journey for me. I'm used to just being covered in paint, and now I get to sit in front of and talk to people who have these incredible, inspiring stories. And I hope that if this podcast found its way to you somehow, maybe someone shared it with you, uh, I hope you would start thinking about, where are you on your creative journey? And some of you are probably asking yourself now, why would I be on a creative journey if I'm not a creative? So I would like to define creativity first as a problem solving process. It's taking a vision, it's using whatever skill sets you may have or you may need to learn to then start bringing that vision to life, to cause this idea into being. And it's something that we can all tap into. It's sort of like a superpower that we all have access to. Now, as an artist, we get to tap into it on a daily basis. But what I hope is that with the paint method, that each of you who are listening or watching this, you start to think about, where am I on this paint method? This passion, action, intent, new, and to teach, and where do I go next, depending on where I fall. And I hope that with these stories as well, with this podcast, these incredibly inspiring people, that they can help you think about just that. Where am I, and what do I create next? For today's podcast, we talked to a really interesting, incredible person. His name's Blake Jameson. Now, the best way I could describe him, his journey felt like I was talking to him. It felt like I was on a Top Gun mission with a jet fighter pilot. And in the beginning of his journey, he's getting his training and maybe going out and doing some drills with his team. And then eventually he goes into battle. He's building his art career and his brand, and really goes into his first battle, but eventually he does land and takes off on another runway in this career of a jet fighter pilot. What it felt like listening to it, and Blake turned a passion into sports, a passion for creating, into this really incredible art brands. And the way that has done it and did it was really asking himself, what's the problem? How do I solve this? But also, how do I keep building on this as well? I was really inspired by his self-awareness of, what he was working with, and also this vision that he had of where he wanted to take his art from major projects with tops, and also really making a huge splash into the NFT world and his own projects, but also a new school called Probably Nothing School to help people launch their NFT projects. So there's a lot we're going to unpack from this conversation, but please let's welcome Blake Jamieson and welcome to the Paint Method podcast. Let's go. We are all on our paint journey, but where are we now? And where do we go next? This is how. Passion, action, intent, new, teach. This is the Paint Method. All right, we're on. What's up, Blake?
What's up, man?
How are you today?
Living the dream.
Yeah. Man, what's funny is I didn't realize how connected we were until I was on Clubhouse in 2021. Like every person that was getting into NFTs, which I'm sure we'll get into. And then at some point, like we end up in a room and we chat, and you mentioned this like crazy story how we are, I guess, originally connected, which was through Craigslist. It was a Craigslist ad or like a Facebook ad about a job opening. It was crazy.
Well, I saw you paint at Second Saturday in Sacramento, and I was living in Sacramento at the time, and I was like, I had just moved there and I was looking for a job, and went out to a Second Saturday, saw you do your thing, and then like saw the Craigslist like posting, personal assistant posting pretty soon after that, and I was like so hyped, and like in my head I was like, I am the perfect guy for this. All I got to do is get in the room. I'm going to get this job. Like, this is what I'm going to do. And obviously it was a little different path than that, but here we are. We found each other eventually. So
what's crazy is now knowing you, if you were in the room, I would have hired you, but I'm also so glad that you didn't, because you went on to like build this art brand that you're literally in the midst of building a brand. Like you're living an artistic dream that, I think even artists who have been doing it for a long time, you're in it. But even before you saw that ad about like, working for me, what was your creative journey early on? Because you're known for athlete portraits, but what came first, the passion for the sports or the art?
Yeah, well, I grew up in a super creative household. My parents, like my dad was super into like film and photography. My mom makes mosaics. They both collect art. And so I just like, our house looks like a museum. And I always liked making it as a kid, and they were always like very, very encouraging. And so, I was really into drawing and making, I was really into like making like costumes and stuff as a kid, and all kinds of stuff. But like, as I think a lot of people do, I got sucked into kind of the mentality of the starving artist and that kind of cliche of art being not a viable career path. And so when it was time to go to college, despite my parents actually suggesting that I study art or minor in art, I like really went away from that. I was like, I just do art for fun. I'm going to do something in business. And so I studied economics, went to UC Davis, which is actually how I ended up in the Sacramento area, which is nearby. And yeah, just kind of got this general economics degree. Was not good at college generally, except I did take a few art classes. And like now looking back, it's funny because like those elective art classes in college were the only A's that I got in college. And it was, the only difference was I cared about the work. And so I like really applied myself and I tried. And then when it came to econ stuff, I would just show up for the syllabus. I'd show up for the quizzes, or the midterms, whatever. And then I'd get like C's.
I was going to ask, I was like, what was your economics grade?
Yeah, no, not good. Not good, man. And so when I graduated college, it was actually it was like 2009, 2010, and social media marketing was just kind of starting to take off. Facebook had been around for a while. I'd been on Facebook since it basically was available 2003, when I was a freshman in college. So like I was pretty familiar, and I thought it would be fun to like help brands, bring their brands online. And so when I didn't get the job for you, yeah, I ended up getting into social media marketing, and worked for some really cool people and helped them bring their brands online and kind of tell their story and do community building on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. And it allowed me to be somewhat creative because I was doing graphic design and video editing, copywriting, but for these other companies, for these other people's dreams. But I was moderately good at it, and had fun, and worked in that, and ended up working in that industry for almost a decade. I was
Wow.
like 8.5 years. And then it was on my 30th birthday that I woke up and I was like, man, I look forward to Fridays and I dread Mondays. And that's not how I want to live my life. And so I put in notice to quit that job, which at the time was like a very corporate, it was like $1 billion brand, publicly traded company, that I was doing social media for. And so I didn't have a plan. It wasn't like I'm going to quit this and I'm going to start painting full time. It was just that I got to get out of this industry and find something that I'm super passionate about. And so
Yeah.
I had never really traveled, and I booked a flight to Barcelona, Spain for
Not
5
bad.
weeks. I had
Not bad.
never, I had been to Mexico and Canada, but I hadn't been like, to Europe or anything. And I didn't have any contacts there at all. I just had like one night, my first night in a hostel was like booked, and everything else I was just winging it. And I had a backpack um, of my stuff. And originally it's funny because my plan was I've been really into like audiobooks for a long time. And there's a particular narrator that I love named R.C. Bray. Anything he narrates, I buy and I listen to. And he happens to narrate a lot of zombie fiction books. And I listened to so many of them over the course of like the last, the years, that I was like, I could write a zombie book. And so that was my goal. Is I was like, I'm going to go to Barcelona, I'm going to explore, and then I'm going to write a zombie book. Um,
It kind of sounds very
you know,
romantic, by the way. It's like a very
yeah. And the
like
goal was like
artistic
to have,
dream.
yeah, yeah. And I started, and I actually like, it's funny. I still intend to finish that book someday because I think that's a fun story I'm working on. But one of the things during the day when I was exploring is I asked the hostel people at the front, like, what should I do? I've never been here. And they're like, oh, you should take this graffiti and street art walking tour throughout the city. And free tours, for people, you just meet at a location and then a tour guide takes you around. And Barcelona has a very rich history in terms of graffiti and street art, which is also like the type of art that I've always been drawn to. Was a big fan of like Banksy, was probably my first artist that I really liked. Shepard Fairey. So the street art and graffiti stuff spoke to me. And so I took this tour, and this tour guide, Raquel, walked us around the city. She told us all about, the kind of the history and how the city um, was like at one time kind of the graffiti capital of the world, and people would come from all over the world. And then they had a leadership change. And then all of a sudden they started kind of buffing over all of the graffiti on the city, on the buildings, but then the doors themselves, they would leave. So all the graffiti in Barcelona is on doors, because even if you own a building, you don't own the walls, the city does, but you own the doors and you own the interior, which is kind of
Wow.
weird. So
That sounds very
the
much
doors are,
like Cuba. Cuba's like that too, where
yeah,
I mean actually people don't really own anything there, but they take care of the inside because that's all they can control. And so the outside
yeah,
just becomes dilapidated.
yeah, yeah. So it was awesome. I really loved it. And I was like, all right, this is cool. And then I get back to my hostel after the tour, and I look across the street and there's a paint store, art store. And I'm like, all right, well, that's a sign. I got to go in there and I got to get some stuff. So I go in, I buy a couple cans of spray paint. I bought like a 18 by 24 sketch pad of like kind of thick watercolor paper that I could use to cut stencils, and X-Acto blades and a cutting mat. And so I started during the day. I would basically sit out on the rooftop of the hostel and I would like draw, and then I would cut it out and make stencil layers. And then at night I would go out and I would start, putting my art out in the streets. And I specifically targeted like all of the stops that she stopped on during the tour, because those were
Yeah.
like the graffiti hotspots. And then like a week later, then I took the tour again, and it was fun like seeing her. And at the time, I was going by the name Stoke, and I had like a little Stoke tag, and she'd be going in the tour and she'd be like, oh, well, this piece is new, I haven't seen this one yet, this looks like it's by an artist named Stoke. And then she goes to the next spot and she's like, ooh, Stoke is here too. Goes to the next spot, oh, this guy Stoke is everywhere. And like, I'm terrible at keeping secrets, so I go to her like at the end and I'm like, I'm Stoke, and she's like, that's so cool. And so she ends up like introducing me to some other graffiti artists there, and then I go out and get up with them. And like, being a kid from California in Spain is like, you're like a cool kid, versus like in California, I'm just from California like everyone else.
Yeah.
But like, they're like, whoa, you're from California, I wish I could go there. So like, they were very, very, it was positive reinforcement right from the jump. And so like, that felt good. And then I got back, like after 5 weeks, I went back to California, um, or back to the US. At the time, I actually was living in Arizona. And I just decided, I was like, you know what? That made me so happy. I had so much fun doing that every single day. I want every day to be like that. And so
Yeah.
that's when I decided like painting is what I'm going to do full time. And I just, I had a house in Arizona. I sold that house, moved back home with my parents again at the age of 30. My parents are so freaking cool that like, I wouldn't change that for the world. I would live with them now.
Yeah.
Uh, they're just that cool. And so they have this like 2 acre farm property, this big barn. And I basically took one of the barn stalls that at one time was an art studio for my grandmother. She had since kind of moved her studio into a different building, but I got like my own art studio, and I had like very low overhead, with rent. And, my parents were there to mom making sure I eat and my laundry's done and stuff. And so like, I just had like a really good and like encouraging setup that I could just really focus on my craft. And because I felt like at that point I was like, wow, I'm 30 years old. I didn't go to art school. I did a tiny bit of graffiti in Barcelona, and like, that's the only experience I have. So I just like locked myself in the barn and painted like 10, 12 hours a day for like a year, almost a year, before I was like ready to like say, okay, I'm going to sell this stuff.
Yeah. And
But
as
that's kind of
as
like it.
encouraging as encouraging as your parents were though, was there any moment they were like, "All right, Blake, like what's the plan here?" Or was it just like, "You know what? We'll support you regardless of what happens."
It was the latter. They were super supportive, and they just could tell like that when I was back there. Like I'm very close with my parents, and I had been living in Arizona for a spell, and before that I was in LA. And so it'd been a while since it had been since high school, since I had like spent a lot of time with them. So they were super happy to have me home and down to support and help however they could, which
Yeah.
was fantastic. And when I was ready to sell art, it wasn't like the sports stuff didn't happen like instantaneously. Um, I knew from my background in marketing and like all the different clients that I worked with, that like the clients that were the most successful had a very specific like audience that they were serving, and group, at customer avatar. And so I knew that like having a niche was going to be super important. And I wanted to run my art business like a real, like a business, and not just like, oh, I make art and like whoever wants it can buy it. Which is fine if people do that. But like for me, I was like, I'm going to do something for some group of people. And so I shared my stuff on social media. People started hitting me up saying, hey, can I buy this for the
And
first
what year was
period of
this?
let's see. So this was 2016,
Okay. Okay.
right? 2000, what? Yeah, 5, 7 years. Yeah, it's been 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah. 2006, it was 22 now, 2015, I
Yeah.
guess.
And at the
I don't know,
time,
I'm
did
bad
you
at math.
feel like it was you were able to lean into a foundation of experience, whether it was the C grade in economics or whether it was uh, working in a corporate structure, but just any experience that would lend to, look, I need some organization with this creativity.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like I learned more on the marketing and organizational side from like my time in the actual marketing industry than like my time at Davis, like academically, uh, I learned a lot. I had a well-rounded education. We'll put it at that.
Yeah.
Like I think that like
Like
I
real
learned
life
all my
education.
yeah. But I learned a lot about business through the clients that I'd worked with, and I had a very good marketing mentor named Roy Steves that kind of taught me like data-driven marketing. And so it's like, there's sides to marketing that are like artistic and kind of romantic, where it's just like, well, it's just you're like Mad Men. You're like the idea, like having fun making the ideas, and that part is super fun. But at the end of the day, like marketing needs to make a difference, and like he really taught me like how to measure the difference that marketing makes, and like how to track that and like build for that from the jump. And so like stuff like that, like where it's just like these lessons that I couldn't really have gotten out of college, at least with like the way that I learn. I'm a very hands-on learner. But yeah, the time in business made me like really understand that I needed to like have the structure, like you said, to
Yeah.
the art to make
And
it work.
so, before we get into the athlete's portrait part of your career, you start this creative career. You've got the time, the support. What wasn't working at that time early on, or did you feel like things were just on an upward trajectory?
um I felt really good about where I didn't feel like I did like I knew that I wanted the niche and needed to find that out, and I didn't come right out of the gate knowing what that was. And it wasn't athletes first. It actually was art for offices, like tech companies.
Yeah,
And I'll like back up a couple steps. So like I started making my art, I posted it online. People would message me saying, "Can I buy it?" And for a long time I would just say, "I'm not ready to sell my art yet." I wasn't comfortable trading up money for it.
yeah,
But I, added them to this list of just people I was going to hit up when I was ready to sell art. And when I was ready, I hit up all those people, did pretty well. Like the first day I offered 10 paintings for sale for $500 each, and they all sold out within less than a day. And so like to make $5,000 the very first day that I ever offered art for sale was like, again, like this positive reinforcement I've gotten kind of throughout my journey
yeah,
is like really, really encouraging, right? And granted, like that $5,000 day, I didn't have another $5,000 day for a long time, but like that showed me that it was possible. And I sold art for, I don't know, 2 or 3 months after that. And then it was like, and then we got to the end of the year, which I guess was, I don't know if it was the end of 2015 or end of 2016. But I like just put all that data of who bought what into a spreadsheet. And then I wrote down, what do they do for work? And then I messaged them all and just asked them like, where is the art hanging? And almost everybody like worked in some type of like tech, like marketing, advertising job. And the art was hanging in either their home office or their office. And like, it's easy now to like look back and say, well, of course they all worked in that industry because that's where I had used to work. And so that's where all my friends were, So I was being supported by people that I already knew from my past life, past career. But at the time, it still felt like a big light bulb where I'm like, haha, what if I focus in on that and say, I make dope art for offices? Um, and then take it a step further to say, okay, well, what kind of office? All right, let's do, after they've raised a Series A round, they're moving out of a co-working space into their first office that they've had. They've got all these blank walls. They've also got like budget, right, for like building out their office. I was thinking if I could take out the emotional side of like an art purchase. If you're just selling to a peer, it's like, ooh, $1,000 might seem like a lot. But if it's like $1,000 that's part of a bigger budget, it's an easier decision for them to say yes to. And
yeah,
so I carved out this like very specific thing. And I was like, all right, well, where do those people hang out? LinkedIn. And so I started marketing on LinkedIn uh, pretty heavily and like treating it like other people would treat Instagram. I would post
mm,
pictures in the studio, little videos, pictures of finished work, works in progress. And like there were some people that were like, why are you doing this? Like, just take this to Instagram. But there was also a lot of other people that were like, oh, you make art for offices? I just got a new office. Like, let's work together. And so like I
yeah.
found this kind of unique marketing angle from that marketing experience, I guess. Is like what took my brain there.
I want to give you credit that I don't know if you'll give yourself, but just going back to that first major day of your first art sale, you were really ready for that moment. So most people put things out to market in business and they've done some sort of planning or they understand who they're selling to. Most artists put things, they kind of go into like an abyss of the art world. And you focused in and focused in and focused in on a very specific uh, collector, or very
Hmm.
specific base. And so I think the structure of your list, brilliant. Like, I'm not ready, but let me get some info. And you just
Hmm.
like, you were like whitelisting before the like whitelisting was a thing, in the art
Yep.
world. I mean, that was brilliant. I think you really deserve credit for that because I don't want anyone to listen to this and think like, well, if, look at him. He got a big sale on the first day. You were very, very patient and knowledgeable about who you were selling to, which helped you
Mm.
sell a lot that first day.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And honestly, like I think I enjoyed doing the art for offices because those were my people too. Like I could, I had already spent a lot of time in those type of offices, and then I could go in and like envision my stuff on the walls, and then eventually I could see it actually on the walls because I was selling the work. And I think that if I had never like strayed away from that, I think I would be like the go-to guy for office art, and that would be fine and fun. But fate had a different path, and I met this guy Jared Faison, who's an ex NFL player, and now he's managing other players. He really liked my work. We hit it off. We had like a mutual friend that introduced us at this concert, and he's like, "Dude, you should paint for athletes." And I'm like, "Yeah, I should paint for athletes. I just don't know how." And he's like, "I got you." He's like, "If you paint for three of my clients for free, I'll have them post about it on social media. You can deliver it in person and meet them and take photos. Like, this is going to be good for you. It'll get your foot in the door." And I've always been down for like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Working for free is, uh, in some cases, like my marketing budget. Um, and I wanted to get my art like into those type of hands. And so, just like he said, like I did three paintings for three athletes. This was 20 summer of 2017. So I had been painting for a while, a year and a half or something at that point. And I met the athletes. They really liked it. They posted on social media. A couple of their teammates like immediately came and were like, "I want to buy one." And at that point, those were like the most expensive paintings I'd sold because I was like, "All right, I need to have my prices be like respectable for a pro athlete, not like price gouging, but just like
Yeah.
getting to where I wanted to be." Um, and for context for anyone listening, that was going from like $500 when I very first started up to like 1,000 or 1,500 bucks for something. And it
Yeah,
was a
you're
little bit
adding
big growth.
value for, who you are. Because there's, art is one of the hardest things to price unless you already
Hmm.
have a real true marketplace already there. And so, starting at that time, you're starting, you already know what your cost is, whether it's time or materials. And now it is, who am I selling to? You don't want to price gouge, but also what is the value of where we want to go next? And I think that's okay that you hike the prices up
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah. I got it up to like where I wanted it to be for that point in my career.
Yeah.
And then I saw that early success and I was like, it kind of just clicked in my head that I'm like, all right, let's lean into this. And like, I guess I probably didn't realize it at the time, but like athletes are a perfect kind of trifecta of an art collector, I think, because there's a ton of great pictures of them online to use as like a reference image. They have the disposable income to buy something like art, and they're also hyper competitive by nature. And so when one guy gets a painting, like those first couple guys, a teammate sees it, and he might not even just want a painting. He wants to one up that guy. So he wants two paintings, or he wants a bigger painting because they're just like they're built like that. And so it's like this perfect storm. And I latched onto that really quick. I went back, I updated my LinkedIn bio to say I make art for offices, and I said I paint portraits for professional athletes,
Wow.
and just really leaned into that. And taking kind of a page out of that first experience, out of that book, I would identify athletes that I wanted to paint for. I would hit them up on Instagram. I would show them a couple things that I've, done. This was just a cold DM. Say, hey, I paint art for athletes. Here's some of my work. If you want, I'll do one for you for free as long as you post it on social media. And it was a numbers game. I hit up a lot of athletes like this. I found out very quickly, like the big stars, Drew Brees and, Joe Montana and, some of those guys, like the big, whatever, big names, you're not going to reach those people, but you can definitely reach like mid-tier guys that have a lot of respect in the locker room, but are not like the Michael Jordans that have thousands of people that are trying to paint pictures for them. Like I'm trying to find people that are newish to the league where like they might not have a portrait of themselves yet. And anybody that saw the message generally was like, yeah, sure, like I'll, send it over. And so I would make a painting for them. And at first I was like really excited to get their home address just because it was like personal information that I was like, haha, I know where so-and-so lives. And, and I found out very quickly that like if you mail to their home, like it takes months for them to open their mail. But if I mail it to the training facility, and this happened by accident because like somebody didn't give me their address. And I'm like, all right, I'm just going to ship it to the training facility. Like the training facilities for NFL, they open the mail and make sure that it's not like threatening or something, like they're vetting the mail and they see it's a painting and then they put the painting in the locker of the player. And so I
Ah,
found out through trial and error, the largest painting that I can fit into an NFL locker
wow.
and it to look dope. And it's like, that's the perfect place to market. And so then I would do like 2 or 3 guys on one particular team, all
Mm,
coordinated, like Green Bay Packers say, okay, I'm going to do these
yeah.
guys, find 3 guys that are down, do all the art, mail them all at the same time, but in separate packages. Um, and so that either they all arrive on the same day or around the same day, where it's like these guys are the whole team's walking in the locker room. There's like 55, 60 people on a football roster. 60 people are seeing a painting and they're like, oh, that's cool. And then the next day or the next locker over, they see another one. They're like, well, that's cool. And they're like, what the heck is like, what is that? And I would
Where's
put,
my
put a bunch.
portrait? It's
Yeah.
like they're just sitting
And
there
so I
like,
would
where's mine?
yeah. And I like wrote my phone number super big on the back of the painting, included a bunch of business cards. And like
Yeah.
every time I would get in with a new team, my phone would start dinging and it was like, hey, I'm so and so. I play for the Packers. I saw your portrait you did for, Raven. I want one or whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, and that worked really well. It was a numbers game where like not every single person that I did one for free turned into a paid one, but like on average over years, every free one I did turned into one paid painting from someone else or from
Wow.
that person. And so it was like that became my marketing budget for my art is like
And,
just painting them and sending them out.
and how long was this transition period from you're making art for offices? Let's call that your day job, like because that had momentum
Yep.
already. Now you're creating momentum in doing athletes for portraits and building that. How long is that transition, and how far also into it were you like, oh, this is it, like this things are about to change?
It was almost immediate transition for me. Uh, like I think I went home after I met um, CJ Anderson, who's also from the Bay Area. Awesome, awesome person. He was the third of those 3. I had done 1, 2, 3, dropped him off. He also bought a painting. I was like, you know what, athletes are this is the way.
Yeah.
And so I updated all my socials to say I paint art for athletes before I really like even when I had only done those 3. Before I figured out like the locker room stuff. Um, and so from the point of view of like the people that knew me as, oh, he does the office stuff, which had been, the previous like 6, 12 months or something, or yeah, 12 months or so, like that inbound stuff would still come in sometimes. And I would definitely like just keep doing that as it came to me. But like I was no longer seeking that out. I was like, all right, I'm pivoting and I'm going to do this athlete thing. And that's partly just like my nature is very like I'm an all or nothing guy. I'm not gonna half get into a new niche. I'm gonna get into the new niche.
Yeah. And so, you're in this world now, creating these relationships and connections with athletes. And before we get into one of the, major collabs that you got into, what is your mindset at this time now? Because you're now committing time to sending the DMs, to having to create the art, send the free art, and then also manage commissions. And so
Mhm.
I'm assuming that time you were solo artpreneur, and or were you
Mhm.
building a team? Because that is a transitional period when you've got to start managing uh, your current business and then also dreams and new plans with that as well. So, what was your mindset at the time managing this new push?
Yeah, I was a solopreneur, and I basically like I would put commissions, like anything that was paying me, because I had to fortunately I had mentioned before that I had this house in Arizona that I lived, and I sold that when I moved back with my parents. And I had kind of made like that had been my art project for the couple years I lived there. I'd remodeled it, and so I did well where like I had a chunk of money that's just sitting there in a bank. And so like I knew like that was I was like using it right to buy my supplies, and I knew that I needed to replenish that. And so like
Yeah.
my top priority was if I have a paid commission, if I have someone reaching out to be like to get a quote or get some mock-ups or anything, like that would be the first thing that I do. Um second like most important thing that I did was doing like athlete outreach, whether that's like if people have already said yes, like how far they are down the pipeline. If they've already said yes that they want a free painting, I was producing that next and getting that out the door. If I didn't have athletes to anything to paint and to send out for free, I was like spending my time hitting up more athletes and like batching that work. And so I just like prioritize it of like, well, I need to keep filling the money bucket if I need if to continue, building my career. And so I just prioritize it like that. And so because of that, there was some stuff that like didn't get done fast enough or sometimes at all. But in my mind, those were like the tasks that weren't having the most immediate impact on like building my business.
Yeah. I mean, but it sounds like you were finding the balance as things went. You know, something falls through the cracks, and you're like, "All right, we need a system in place." I think I do that more on a daily basis. Is when something falls through a crack, getting together
Yeah.
with a team and thinking, "What do we need to do so this doesn't happen again?" But
Hmm.
all right, so you're in this athlete world. You got this flow going, and then when does the call come through to do this collab with Tops? I know that
Hmm.
at the time it was, I don't know if they had done artist collaborations yet. I was familiar with some things that were just in card collecting. I knew it was big, but what was that like getting that call from Tops or the email, the DM, and just presenting
Yeah.
this opportunity to collab with them? And
Yeah.
also, if you could
So
share
that
what that
was,
project is as well, so the people that may not
yeah, of
know what
course.
that is.
Of course. So I'll take you kind of just through the timeline that led up to it. So I started painting the athletes. I was still in California, um, and got some good momentum, and had painted 250 to 300 athletes uh, over the course of like a year. I paint pretty fast. I paint a lot of work. I'm more of a volume guy than like I don't spend like months on a painting ever. Um,
Neither do I. I can
and
relate.
at the time, I know you do it. You do it on a whole nother level. I'm trying to get there. Um, at the time, my girlfriend and I uh, decided that we wanted to move to New York. And New York is something that it's a place I've always wanted to live. And I had visited a couple times, and I liked it. And I knew in terms of art, it was one of the meccas for art in the U.S. And so I had through selling art to these athletes, I had saved up some money, although I'd pretty much burnt out my whole fund from the house sale. And so I moved to New York, and that's actually also when I hired my first studio assistant, when I got my studio there. And it was a crazy time, like going from like living at home with your parents and like having it really kind of, it's like it was a pretty sweet setup to like living in Manhattan, having a studio in Queens, having a studio assistant. Like all of a sudden, my overhead was just like massive, and I was a little bit like over my head, feeling like that sometimes of like, oh man, what did I get into? Like I could have just stayed in California and I would be just stacking all this money. And instead, like my business was still growing and I was making more money on the top end, but then it was like all going to like my rent and expenses. And I woke up one morning and I had an email, and it was from the contact form on my website. And it was from this guy named Jeff Heckman, who is the project lead at Tops. Tops makes baseball cards as well as all kinds of cards, but baseball specifically is what I got the call about. And it was a message saying, "Hey, I work with Topps. We're doing this artist project." And this was middle of 2019 when this happened. And it was a project that was launching in 2020. It was called Project 2020, and it was 20 different artists reimagining 20 iconic Topps baseball cards in their own artistic style. And so each artist was given like the Nolan Ryan rookie card, Ken Griffey rookie card, Mike Trout, and there's 20 20 players, most of which are like retired Hall of Fame players, some active players. And when I saw the email, I literally thought it was fake. I thought it was a spam thing because I like, you get those contact form submissions that are like, we're gonna do this way, blah blah blah. Like I just get all this crap. I've
Yeah.
never gotten anything really useful from that. But I responded and I said, sure, let's set up a call. And we did a call, and it was indeed real. And we ended up locking in like this contract to do that project. And the project lasted the entire year of 2020. It was 20 cards where it was basically I would have a new card coming out every 2 weeks, which for me meant I needed to do a painting for them every 2 weeks, photograph it, and then give them that digital file so they can print the card.
Now, I'm
And
curious. Real quick, did they ever share how they found you? And I ask you this because maybe there's some creatives or artists out there that really want to position themselves to be able to do a collaboration or work with the brand that they love. But uh, do you know how they ended up finding you? And maybe in a way, sharing how artists should be positioning themselves as they're building their career.
yeah, I do know exactly how they found me. It was also from another free painting that I'd done. And it's interesting because there's been a couple of these big turning points in my career. One of them being getting into the athlete side. And that was really from doing some free work for NFL athletes through that intro with Jared. This time it was for a professional lacrosse player named Paul Rabel. I played lacrosse in college and in high school. And Paul Rabel is one of the greatest players of all time. And he started following me on Twitter, and I just hit him up. He's like, "Oh, I love your work." And I was like, "You want a painting? I got you." And he's like, "Hell yeah." And he was just starting the Premier Lacrosse League with his brother Michael. They had just gotten a new office, ironically. So I ended up in an office that also was sports related. Um, and so I did this painting for Paul, and because I like idolize Paul in my lacrosse career, like I really tried to make that painting special. Still only spent a day or two on it because that's what I do. But I
That's like
really was like
forever.
trying. Yeah, I know. I tried to make it as dope as I could. Mailed it down to LA to him. He ended up putting it in his office, kind of like this, where he had stuff behind him and he just had the big painting behind him. And like he's really big into content. He shoots so many videos. And so my art was just in like every video that he was putting out. And this guy, Jeff from Topps, is a big lacrosse fan. And so he was tracking Paul as he was starting this new league with his brother. And so he just Jeff kept seeing my work. And like Paul, when people would like comment like, "Oh, whose art's that?" He'd say Blake Jameson. And so that's how Jeff found me, is through that painting. And like I didn't expect to get anything back from like working with Paul. I wanted just to give him something that I thought was cool, that hopefully he thought was cool too. And like that
Yeah.
was enough for me. But that's how Jeff found me. And then he did a little more digging and saw that I had done like a lot of athlete stuff. Although he did tell me, he's like, we weren't looking for people that specialized in athletes. We were just looking for like interesting artistic styles that we thought would translate well to sports cards.
Yeah. And I
So
think that's really important to point out though is that yeah, like I'm like I feel like I'm right here with you on your journey. I've been listening to this and I just like am so tunnel vision alongside with you. And I think that also, I've seen your art. You do incredible art. You have a very specific style. And so I think that is also, the most major part aside from your hustle of why you are positioning yourself, why you are able to reach out to an athlete or a brand because you're presenting amazing art. At the end of the day, it's got to speak for itself. So, you gotta take that credit as well.
thank you. Yeah, man, I appreciate it. I like what I do. I think it's funny. I mean, I think, and I would imagine every artist is like this. Like I would imagine like you two probably with like your Einstein series is like, I paint something and I'm like, this is the greatest thing that I've ever made. And then I look at it a year or two later and I'm like, oh my gosh, I could do that so much better.
Oh yeah.
Uh, but at the same time, I still like see my old work and I'm like, for that point in my life, for where I was at, that's the best that I could do. And that's awesome. Like, that's really cool. So I appreciate that. I still feel like I have a long way to go and growth, like as an artist,
As we
but
should feel that way. I think that's
yeah,
exactly how you feel is how we should be, which is at the moment it's your absolute best. But tomorrow you're like, I gotta do better than that, and so on for as long as we can create.
yeah, yeah. And like almost always, whenever people are asking, like, what's your favorite thing you painted?
Oh
I'm like, the
man.
last thing I painted.
Exactly. It,
Um,
it, it sounds
although I do,
cliche, but it's so true. It's so true.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I love it.
All right, so I don't get too
Um,
off track with the top thing because this is
yeah,
it
yeah.
was a
Sorry, top.
huge
Yeah,
huge thing. So it's a Project
yeah.
2020, 20 artists
Yep,
reimagining 20 different cards in their specific style, and it's like a two
yep,
week at a time deliverable. Is that right?
yep.
Oof.
Yes, every 2 weeks I have new art due.
Yeah.
But for me, because I paint, usually I spend a day on a painting. That was not too hard for me. Like that wasn't intimidating, and it was great to know that like I had work the entire year. So like,
Mhm.
just to back up a little bit, I had said like I was starting to become in a tough spot
Yeah.
uh, in New York because it was just so expensive to live, and like I don't know how like deep you want to go. I'm super transparent and like down
Yeah.
to like talk numbers if you want. Um,
Whatever you want to share. We could also edit it out later if you're like, actually, that one thing I shared, please don't. But
no,
yeah,
I
feel
don't.
free to
I'm an
share
open
anything.
book.
Yeah.
Okay, so for context, I was making about 100K a year
Mhm.
from my art sales, most of which were originals. There were some prints and stuff, but like 100K a year, if you live at home with your parents for free, is like you're living a life of luxury.
Yeah.
100K in New York, if you're uh, having an apartment rent that costs, the apartment was $4,200. I had a girlfriend that I shared it with. My studio is $2,500. Um, and then all the other costs of living, of
Yeah.
like transportation and food and this and that. Like all of a sudden, it's like, wow, I am barely scraping by every single month. I'm like, I gotta sell one more thing so that I can
Yeah.
get rent. Um, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I put together a pitch deck to raise money. I wanted to raise $50,000, and I was going to give up 10% of basically do a rev share 10% for 3 years.
Uh-huh.
And I had tracked like the 100K I was making at the time was like it had been like 20K, then I got up to like 60K, then I was at 100 by that point in my career. So I
Yeah.
knew like I was tracking up, and I had done all the math to show like to somebody like this is going to be a good investment, like you're going to get your money back plus some by like betting on me. And I didn't raise the whole amount, but I raised some, actually from someone that I went to high school with, and then someone else that I went to college with. And like this was, and then as soon as I got that, I like took their money and gave them a percentage for the next 3 years. Then I get this tops thing, and the tops deal was a royalty deal. So I'm paid a 10% royalty on everything that sells online,
Mhm.
and the cards are available for 48 hours, and they're $20 per card. And so every card that sells, I make $2. They're only available for 48 hours. So like I'm like pushing, everyone go buy the card, hurry, get it before it's sold out.
Yeah.
And then after 48 hours, they stop selling the cards, and then they publish like the print run of the cards saying, oh, there was 1,000 cards of these printed.
Yeah.
And Topps didn't really know because it was the first time they'd done an artistic like collaboration like this, they didn't know what to expect. But they told us, because I asked them, like, well, what should I expect in terms of how many cards are going to sell? And they said, well, when we do these print on demand type products, generally the lowest it ever is 200 sales. And usually it's like 2,000, it could be a couple thousand. And then the most we've ever sold of a card print on demand at that time was 20,000 cards. So I'm
Wow.
thinking, all right, sick. So if it's,
Yeah.
you know, if it's average 2,000, I'm going to get $4,000 per painting, multiplied times 20 paintings. That's a good amount of money, right? I think that's
And
80
and real
grand.
quick, do you own the painting when you're done, or is that given up to Tops? Can you sell the painting
I
separately or no?
negotiated to keep I negotiated to keep the painting.
Okay.
At first they wanted it. That was one of the only things I pushed back on. And if they had said no, we have to keep it, I would have given it to them. But my argument was, well, I'm doing it with actual paintings. A lot of the artists that they're working with were doing it digitally. So they're just sending them a digital file. I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, but I'm sending you can have the digital file, but I want to keep the physical painting. And they
Yeah,
let me do that.
that's awesome.
So Topps gave me a $25,000 advance, and I started painting these cards, and it was like almost immediately this project like started to get a lot of momentum. The very first card was the Nolan Ryan for me, which did 2,700 copies, um, and so that was like $5,000, which at the time was much more than I would charge for a painting that size. And I got to keep the painting. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is
Yeah.
amazing. Um, and like I also like I grew up collecting baseball cards, and I love baseball cards. And so I was like in the forums, on Twitter, engaging anybody that's talking about baseball cards. Excuse me. I was like, hey, I'm Blake, and not like, hey, buy my stuff. Like, hey, I
Yeah.
love cards too. Like, whatever, like just being in that conversation. And so like I was a big ambassador for Project 2020 and for Tops, and Tops really appreciated that, and that we'll kind of get to it later because I've done 3 sets with them now, and part of that's because they saw like I'm really willing to hustle.
Yeah.
But like at the peak, I did a Mike Trout card in the summer of 2020 that sold 76,000 copies, and
Oh my
so
God.
that was like
That's
150K.
insane.
I know, and I got to keep the painting, and
Yeah.
so um the other thing too is that like I was really early on that just like was bananas is baseball card collectors are all about autographs, right? They want those special autographs. And so like there was me and one other artist, and it's funny because me and this guy Tyson Beck each like I think he did it first and then I did it, but he thinks I did it first and then he did it. I'm not sure. We both kind of had this idea. We ran with it where we
Yeah.
released. So when Topps put out the cards, like I also could buy my own cards just like everyone else. I got a little bit of a discount. It wasn't like a crazy discount, but I got some, I think I paid $12 a card instead of 20 or something like
Yeah.
that. So I would buy a handful
By
of the
the way, I
cards
have one of your
myself.
cards back here too. I can't see.
Yes.
I think it's the. I'll have to look at it later, but I have one of the
Yeah.
cards literally back here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so I like then I would sign the cards and I would number them on the back. And so I would do like a gold autograph, and I would do that just one of them, and I would put one of one. And then I would do a silver, like a Molotov chrome, liquid chrome pen, and do like 5 of those. And then I would do like for Nolan Ryan, I think we did what is it, 32 was his number, I think. We do like the player number, like different the numbers, right, of the players,
Yeah.
and that would be like a color. And then I would put those on my own website, and I would sell them from like $100 up to $1,000 for the gold one of ones. And like the first I did Nolan Ryan, I didn't buy enough cards. I only had 70 of them, and so I ended up doing like 70 autographs, and they sold out so fast. And it was like, and so at the time it was like I had sold 2,700 cards, so it was like going to be a little over $5,000 royalty. And then I did these autographs and I put them out, and I did like $14,000 that day. And they all
Yeah.
sold out, and people just couldn't get enough of them. And so I like ended up the part of my business that really really grew and was like in my control even more was like the selling my own autographed cards, and then also collecting like the royalties from Tops. And so like my business went from doing like we did uh 100 something thousand before, and then with Tops between autos and royalties I did like 900K in 2020, and my
Yeah.
business was just like bam.
Yeah.
And
That's
it's crazy
incredible.
because then I started like it was right after I'd taken that investor money, and both of
Oh
these
man,
guys didn't put
that's
it.
like a seed round, right? That's like it's like they just got in the seed round of Blake Jameson.
Yeah, it took them like I was doing quarterly payouts and giving them. Uh, I didn't even get that much money from them. I didn't complete the whole round, but like they had one guy had like a point and a half, uh, and he got paid back like so fast, and then it's just all profit for him. And I mean, he's great. It's awesome, and he loves like it's really fun to be in that position. But I'm like, man, if I had just waited like another month or two, I wouldn't have needed to fundraise. But
Yeah,
is what it
but I
is.
think
I
there was
did, and
almost with like again, I feel like I'm like right here with you on your journey, and it seems like every point of where you had an opportunity presented, or even when struggle presented, or being unsure, you had this like, let's try this. And even with that, there was some sort of plan in place. There was like a vision, and here's kind of how we're going to do it. There was always like a
Mhm.
solution added to that. And I think that as much as the Tops thing presented an opportunity, I think it was more of a runway for you to really put to work what you had been doing this whole time in your career, which is here's something I can do, here's kind of a plan, and then here's the sweat equity to bring it to life, and just nonstop on that end. And then Tops is like, here's your runway, ready for takeoff.
Mhm. Yeah, and it was crazy too because this was all 2020 is like when COVID hit, and like
Yeah.
the project 2020 even they delayed the launch a month because of like we all at least I thought COVID was going to last 2 weeks. Everyone locked down. The virus will die out. We'll move back. We'll get back to life.
Yeah.
So they postponed it a month out of like precaution, and then like COVID just kept getting worse and worse. And I was like, I remember thinking like, oh my god, if they shelf this project, like I don't know what I'm going to do. But they didn't, and like because COVID shut down all the sports, where like nobody like baseball, for example, wasn't happening. They stopped playing, and so everybody that wanted baseball like their fix, like turned to these sports cards because there was no other cards coming out at that time because there wasn't anything happening, right? It was
Yeah.
just these like recreations. And so like I ended up really lucking out, and I really like leaned into like I actually really enjoy like working in isolation. It's funny when like everything happened and it's like quarantine. I was like, quarantine. That's what I like. That's what it's called. I want to quarantine because I like love just being in my studio and like doing my thing. And so I really like deep dove into this baseball card community, and I started live streaming uh, every single day, 10:23 p.m. Eastern. I would live stream, and like on average, the streams were like 3 hours each, and it was different every day. Like the first time I did it, I was painting one of my cards, and it was a test. I was like, hey, you guys want to watch me paint? I'm not even going to talk to you guys. I'm just going to put the computer on screen. I am doing my thing. And people just loved it. Like they watched the whole time and watch me paint this Ricky Henderson card. And then they were like, we need more of this. We need more of this. And so I started live streaming almost for the entire year of 2020. I live streamed every single night, and sometimes it was AMAs, sometimes I would interview other artists, sometimes I would paint my cards. I started doing like Mail Monday, where like because people would send in like fan mail, and I would like open all the mail online. It was absolutely insane, and I just like I felt really embraced like by the community of the hobby, the card collecting community, and like I also just really enjoyed it. And so it's just like it was a really special time, and I feel like there's part of me that feels guilty because I know that a lot of businesses struggled, and some of them shut down or they were laying people off. Meanwhile, I was like ramping up. By the end of 2020, I think I had like almost 10 employees, some in person and some all over. It really like was a huge thing for my business.
Yeah. And so, to transition, the obviously the Tops thing was a massive success. I'm not sure. Are you doing any more with Tops, or is that project done? Because I know I just want to talk about some more projects that you have coming up. But
Yeah.
where are you at with Tops right
Yeah.
now?
Yeah, so I followed up with that set with I was invited to do a standalone set, and so in that case, it was a 1951 Tops, which was their first year that they had the MLB license, and I was reimagining that entire set. So in that case, I had to do 52 paintings, uh, and I had like 30 days to do it, which is crazy. to really like hit our deadlines. Cause that wasn't just one card at a time being released. This was like a whole set of cards that was
Yeah.
like in a box. So my December of 2020, I just locked myself in my studio and painted 52 paintings. That project released in early 2021 and, was successful. It wasn't like it wasn't crazy like that Mike Trout card, but it was like a really nice follow up thing. And then they had another group project that was many artists all contributing to the same set that they invited me to be a part of, which just ended like a week ago.
Mhm.
And it was basically like Project 2020, but in 2021. And because they had more artists, they had 52 artists, I think. It just stretched a little here into 2022. So I'm at a point now where I'm talking to Tops about what we're going to do next. I think for sure I will do something with them.
Mhm.
Tops also was acquired by Fanatics
Yeah.
pretty recently, like 3-4 months ago. And so they're going through some leadership changes. And I don't really know, like Jeff Heckman too, who was my contact that brought me in, he left to go, work in another venture. I do have some other good friends at Tops. I love those people and I hope to continue working with them. But I don't know because the business is under new leadership. So
Yeah.
I would guess
Well,
that I will. We'll see.
yeah. So I'm now imagining you as a jet fighter pilot. All right. Just follow me
Yeah.
here. So
Okay.
you did your Top Gun training early on with like do the office stuff, and then you get to go into
Mm-hmm.
battle once with the athletes' portraits. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's like a new runway. You just take off with Tops. So now you're coming down the field, but you're landing on another runway, which is NFTs. And now
Mm-hmm.
you're coming off the success of creating a momentum, building a team, having a very clear vision of how to produce art and how to engage with your audience. Really powerful tools. Like your
Mm-hmm.
plane is ready for battle. Like, what's up? Who wants it? And then
Yeah.
the NFT runway presents itself in early 2020. I mean, maybe it was a little bit in 20, but let's just say
Mm-hmm.
2021. And
Mm-hmm.
what happened when you were like, what's a non fungible token and how
Mm-hmm.
do we maximize this? Like, what was that like?
Yeah. So I got into NFTs in the summer of 2020. So when I was doing all these live streams with the cards, I was interviewing on Fridays. I would do artist interviews, and I interviewed this guy named Micah Johnson. He had played professional baseball, retired, and had since become an artist, a painter.
Yeah.
And he was into NFT stuff. And during our call, he's like, "Hey, you should really check out this website called Super Rare. It lets you sell digital art." And at the time, we didn't even call it NFTs. To me, it was called crypto art.
Yeah.
And he got me kind of ushered in, introduced to like the founder of Super Rare, who like onboarded me, which is crazy now to think about that I had that like personal concierge service.
Yeah.
Um, but it was super new. And I mean, I was doing it for months before I even heard the word NFT. And when someone finally told me like, "Oh, you should do NFTs," I'm like, "Oh, what's that?" And they explained it. They're like, "Oh, I think I do that already." Um,
I love that. You like
and
accidentally was
yeah,
already into NFTs. Like, no, we call that something else, actually.
yeah. Um, Yeah. And so like, and part of me is like from working in like the marketing side and like really when I was in marketing, it was a lot of like tech. So like seeing tech, like new frontier tech come out, I'm always like early adopter. Like I was, early on Facebook and super early on Snapchat and here on Twitter before most people, all kinds of things. I'm always like, yeah, let's see if this pops off. And so I did the same thing with the crypto art and like, it didn't really like pop off for me, but like it was there and it wasn't very heavy lift to like take some stuff from my archive and like start minting it
Yeah.
and then just tweeting about it and see what happens. And whenever I'd make a sale, I'd be like, oh my gosh, somebody spent, $300 on this, like a picture of something that I already painted and got paid for years ago. It was like insane. And then I started making, some art specifically for that and like really like leaned in. Early 2021 is like, that was one of my New Year's resolutions at the end of 2020 is I was like, all right, this Tops thing was awesome. These NFTs seem to have some legs. I'm going to really start going in. I'm going to try and mint one new thing every day. And I'm also going to try, I like wanted to be kind of a crash test dummy of like all the different platforms. And so, I was trying Super Rare and Foundation and OpenSea and Rarible, any platform that I could get onto and mint something I was trying, and then just like seeing what happened.
Yeah.
And saw some like pretty early success on Super Rare. Ended up like getting lucky where like CNBC caught what, like, I knew somebody that knew that what, like, CNBC was writing a piece about NFTs, and like this was like super early where like the media just wasn't covering it that much yet. And the mutual friend was like, you got to talk to Blake. He's a great artist. He works with tops and like he's crushing it in NFTs. And so like I had this piece come out in early uh maybe February, March, something like that of 2021 that like covered my success in the NFT space. And it wasn't like that crazy success, but it was like big enough that it was, a CNBC article. And they like came out to my studio and filmed a segment. And then like, because I had worked with athletes so much, those early athlete projects like Gronkowski and Mahomes both had projects that came out, and then they did millions of dollars in a day.
Yeah.
And so then all of a sudden, hundreds of athletes that I had painted for over the last couple years before that were now hitting me up, either themselves or their agents, to be like, yo, I see that you're into the NFTs and you've painted for this, my client, or you painted for me, like, let's do a project together. And so it was like I had so much inbound, and I had to kind of pick and choose like which ones I was going to work with. The first project I did was with Terrell Owens, who's a pretty iconic receiver, one of the greatest of all time, and did a project with him, which was cool. I definitely like, he's got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of followers, or millions maybe if you count everything. Like, I thought it was going to be easier with an audience that size to like move units. But that's when I learned like, oh, okay, well, like it doesn't translate necessarily like big followings unless those people already have like knowledge of NFTs and have like a crypto wallet set up. It's hard to onboard those people. And that like friction is still something that we're dealing with. I think it's getting easier and it will continue to get easier. But like, that's when I learned, I'm like, okay, you know what? It doesn't make sense for me to partner with these athletes with these big audiences when like I have a bigger audience than they do in the NFT space.
Yeah.
I don't need them. And I still like, not like I don't need them, but like, I didn't need them the way that I thought that I did. And
Yeah, it's a
so I've
different
sensed
type
like
of
I have,
person. Yeah, it's like,
yeah,
someone who follows an athlete is just a different type of collector than someone who is already in NFTs, already collecting them. They've got it's almost like they're just interested in tech and art in general, and then they're trying to find other things that they're passionate about and seeing what
mhm,
connects in that world from there.
yeah, yeah. And so it was great. I mean, I continued to be the crash test dummy and learn as much as I can and work with as many people as I can. And also like in New York, as like things started to kind of open back up again, uh, there's a really vibrant NFT scene, and I've gotten in with like a lot of very, very talented creators in New York that all kind of support each other and lift each other up. And so it's awesome, man. NFTs it's the future.
And
It's the
and that's how
way,
we
and it's like a
reconnected.
huge,
And that's also how
yeah.
we reconnected. I was, on
Yeah.
Clubhouse. I feel like I was just shilling on there every day, but just really tapping into conversations about NFTs, and we connected. And along with you, I had met people who I would never have had an opportunity to really connect with, unless
Mhm.
it was for these particular projects, like with NFTs, with just crypto in general, and just learning about this whole new world. And the paint method, and I shared it with you a little bit earlier, but it's about this journey, this creative journey that we're on, that you are very much on and have been on, about starting things with passion, and also connecting an early passion. Say it was lacrosse that you did, and connected it with art, and created it for someone, and it positioned you to go off and do this huge project with tops and so on. But also, I'll skip forward to the end. The T is a really interesting part, because it's about teach. It's about imparting knowledge onto others. And you've learned a lot. You were this crash test dummy in early NFTs, and even with successful projects like Knights of Deegan, which
Hmm.
I'm a proud collector of as well.
Yeah.
But you just launched a course. It's called, I think it's NFTs Crash Course. Is that the correct title?
Probably Nothing School. That's like
Oh,
that's the subtitle.
that's right.
It's called Probably Nothing School,
Probably
and
Nothing
like and that
School. Brilliant.
yeah, and like I just kept seeing like as NFTs were really taking started to get more and more momentum, like things would happen where it's like, you know, for example, Facebook changed its name to Meta. That was like a pure NFT like metaverse play. Like people would post those kind of headlines and then they'd write probably nothing, because it was like a joke of because for a long time, like the people that were talking about NFTs, most people would be like, "What is that? That's like a scam. That's not real." And so everyone in the space just kind of leaned into it of saying like, anytime there's like really cool stuff happening, it's like appended with probably nothing. And so
Yeah.
I thought probably nothing school was just kind of a fun play on that. And yeah, that kind of like I have been interested in exploring like the educational side of anything like the especially like online education I think is fantastic. Like when I was learning to paint, I was going literally like just on YouTube and I was watching every video I could about how to make a stencil, how to cut a stencil, how to make this, how to do that. I would just Google it, and then I would look on YouTube for videos, and like I wanted more structure to it, but that wasn't available at the time. And so I've known one thing that like really appeals to me is like the passive income angle of like if you can make an online course or some type of online product and then it can sell forever. Like I don't have to keep doing transactional things like painting painting and then making money and then go paint a painting and then trade it for money. It was like I can make something once and I can get paid over and over again. Just like Tops was really with the licensing deal is I made a painting once, it could sell 75,000 times. But with Tops it like ended. It was like, okay, now I have to go do another thing. I want to find, and still I'm always seeking finding like opportunities where I can like put in effort and then create income streams that could last, some amount of time.
Yeah.
And originally I thought I was going to launch my own NFT project, from, going through and being the crash test dummy, trying all the platforms. I was like, all right, I've got this kind of like not totally figured out. I don't think anyone does, but like I know a lot. I'm going to do my own project, start to finish, do it my own. I'm going to do it in a bubble. And then I'm just going to like record everything that I do in like notes. And then I'm going to like kind of translate that and turn that into this course that show people like, hey, here's how you do an NFT launch. Um, it was like kind of a last minute decision to be like, oh, it would be really cool to do it live and like do this course where like the like the Genesis class number 1 that comes in actually sees me launch a project where the lessons that I talk about are then just applied to my project. And then we go all the way through the project and we see how that goes. And like the risk there, I guess, is like, I don't know how successful the project is going to be. Like maybe if I had done the project beforehand, before the class, maybe I get to the end and I'm like, you know what, we didn't sell that well, or it didn't do what I thought. Like I might have just scrapped the course idea altogether and been like, I'm going to just keep tinkering. But like I'm a much like better, just like, let's just go. And
Yeah.
so I just started doing it live, and it's pretty, it's exciting, but honestly, like it's still a little bit like scary to me because I'm like, I have this responsibility to like show these people how to launch this course. And alongside that, I'm like very committed to making sure that like my course or my kind of follow along launch does well. But also, I think that like it'll be interesting because it's not going to go perfect, and I think there will be things that I do that I'm like, oh, I could have done that better. But then like the students can see like that's okay. You could just go do something, and then you can reflect on it and say, okay, cool. Well, next time, all you students that are watching, you just saw me make this mistake that had these like repercussions. Whenever you do your project, try a different thing, which I think is like a fun component. And it's also like, there's like 100 students in the class and they're all invested in like seeing this project be successful. So I think once it's like ready to launch, which is called Dreamers Club, when it launches, I've got, 100 people that are going to be tweeting about it for sure right off the
Yeah.
bat, which is really cool. But yeah, it's super fun. And I think that like teaching something is such a good way to like solidify that you know it well.
Yeah.
And the amount of like research I've done, even about stuff that I already feel like I know, I like research it again just to make sure, like, if I'm going to put this into a curriculum, I got to make it right. Like, I got to make sure it's spot on. So like, it's forcing me to get even better, which is like a side benefit.
Yeah. I mean, it's, to really become more of an expert in your field, when you start teaching, you're right. You're going back and re-educating yourself on what may be like the basics, but you're reaffirming to what you know, and you're also learning clear ways to communicate this as well. I was gonna say, I think it's the most honest way you could do this, and the way you're presenting it, whether it's live or as the project is going, and based on your trajectory, you're probably nothing school might be bigger than everything else that you've already done. So you're like, again, you're this fighter pilot. You're on this new NFT runway. So I think it's
Mhm.
incredible. And again, I'm so glad that I didn't hire you, because you did so much better than what I think any of us could have imagined. It's inspiring to watch. Uh,
Thank
I want to read you this quote before we wrap this up, and this is you. This is your quote, and I think this also may
Cool.
lend to your mindset as you build. But it's from your Forbes interview.
Nice. Nice.
I should spend as much time as I possibly can either painting things or signing things, because those are really the only two tasks that I'm the only person who can do them. Now, I that quote stuck out to me because as artists, it's hard for us to envision, building something that can last beyond us, or something that can work without us. So even
Mhm.
though creating is the most important thing that we have to do, where our success truly comes from is understanding how we can build teams, how we can build up the people around us, and even attract people. And that's a different skill set to do that. That's truly how we grow as individuals, as we grow as you know building these brands. And so I want to end with this question based on that quote: is what would you tell a young creator who's got the momentum right now? Like they're experiencing the shift. They're solo
Mhm.
artpreneur, and what would you suggest for them as their next step, or like a mindset that they need to have going forward as they are potentially building their art brand?
Mm. Um, I mean, it ties in with the quote, but I think like spending as much time as you possibly can doing the thing, making the art, because that's the only thing that needs to be done in your art business that only you can do. In terms of like hiring help, it's hard. It's really hard to find people that are like as invested in. I mean, it's impossible actually to find someone that's invested in your dream as you are. But you can find people that are close. I think like when you're hiring, and I've like done this well sometimes and done this poorly sometimes, but I'm hiring personality types more than skill sets. And because every single skill that needs done in an art business can be learned. It's great if you find someone that has, experience growing an Instagram account, or project management, or whatever it is, production. But I've found that my best employees have always been the ones that I just like vibe with, from like a personality, and having the same kind of like drive to like get shit done. Sorry, I don't know if I can swear. Get
Oh, you
stuff
could
done.
swear as much as you want.
Whatever it takes. Having the whatever it takes attitude is like, I think, really important. Um, I also think that like, and I've kind of gone back and forth on like putting this into practice in my own like life and business, but it's like, you're not like there's no race. Like, you're just here. Like, for me at least, why I like painting, and the idea of like this as a career, and like my ultimate goal is just like, I want to wake up every single morning and be able to do whatever I choose to do that day. I want to have the ability to go do that. And like right now in my life, that's painting pictures. Sometime it might be making sculptures. Other times, like some of this NFT projects that I'm doing, I'm actually not creating the art. I'm more of like an art director, and I'm going out and finding other illustrators and animators to like bring my ideas to life in a way that like I wouldn't be able to do with a pen or a brush. And yeah, I mean, I just think that like just knowing that like it's always a work in progress. It's never going to be perfect no matter what. You know, my business grew so much from 2019 to 2020, you know, in terms of like revenue, but like my problems grew too. I just have different problems and they're more expensive to fix. Uh and that's fine. And so that I think that just like having like the patience and knowing that like for me, like I'm getting to wake up every morning and I'm getting to do what I can do, what I want to do is like, that's like a success. And I think there's a lot of people that are benchmarking themselves against like where they see other people. And that's like really easy to do when you see like Instagram that obviously only shows the rainbows and Lamborghinis and doesn't show like all like this, the struggle and the, you know, the late nights or like missing rent or buying gas with nickels and all this stuff that like a lot of artists, myself included, have done. Um, but like those are also like special moments, and like that gives me like that's it's so much fun now to like you know be able to like live the lifestyle that I do, knowing like that I also moved home with my parents when I was 30, and I you know all kinds of challenges, and that wasn't necessarily a challenge. I got really lucky in that situation, but like buying gas with nickels, I've done that. I've like had to like not know how I'm going to pay anything, you know, and I've been super behind on bills where like creditors are like knocking down my doors. You know, I got through it, and like might hit another point in my life where like I'm back in that like situation of struggling, and I feel like more prepared for it. But I don't even
Yeah.
know. Like that's just kind of
I
it's
think
nothing
it's perfect.
specific. It's just
No, I
you
think
know,
that's perfect. I think that like, you know, even to summarize that, I think one of the most important parts that you shared was not comparing where you are to anyone else. We are all
mhm.
on this journey at different points. You know, I'm sitting here listening to you. I've learned so much through this conversation, and it helps me want to be more focused. You know, this tunnel vision that I'm inspired by that you have, and yeah, there's just so much from this conversation that I learned from. There's so much from this conversation that I hope those of you who are listening learn from. Blake, how can people follow you and just follow this journey? Because it is not done.
Yeah. So my website is blake.art. The school's website is probably nothing.school. But in terms of interaction, like Twitter's where it's at. I respond to every single person, DM, you know, Twitter, like Twitter at public tweeting to me. I'm just at Blake Jameson, which is my name. And yeah, I'm super active. I just love Twitter and would love to connect with as many people as I can.
Yes, yeah. Please go hit up Blake, and yeah, he's definitely he responds to everything. So, and man, I appreciate you taking this time, sharing this knowledge, whether you knew it or not. We just got like a master class in building an art brand, so I appreciate that. We're turning this into
Yeah.
a offshoot of probably nothing course.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
No, but
love it,
man, and
man.
also I cannot wait to do something with you, like some sort of collab, even if it's a one of one. I don't care. I want to
Mhm.
definitely. I would love to do something with you one day.
I would love that too, man.
Just gonna put it out in the universe. But
That's
Blake,
right.
thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thanks for being on the Paint Method. We're you were one of our early guests on here, so I appreciate you rolling the dice. And this thing isn't even out yet, but thank you so much.
Awesome.
Appreciate it, brother.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Yeah. Likewise.